before puberty, I really think kids should just be kids. I agree with that, and I think a lot of people, especially conservative people, would agree with that statement. Whatever we're doing as far as like making children's books where kids see different types of people, it comes from a place of compassion. I feel safer, honestly. I feel more privileged, especially as a white man. As far as saying you're a different species, it doesn't make sense.
Have you ever kicked around the idea of detransitioning?
I have.
Welcome to the Tested and Twisted podcast. I'm your host. My name is Chase Shaw. Today we have my brother, the one and only M. Shaw. How you doing today?
I'm good.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm excited to have this conversation. When I started this podcast, you were like one of the people who I was like, I gotta have him on because I feel like this is a very unique perspective and there's not a lot of people who can speak on this.
Yeah, or at least in this atmosphere.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to preface this conversation by saying that the Tested and Twisted community, we are a loving community who accepts all kinds as long as they're not a short list of certain types of people. I'm just fucking around. So if you got hateful comments to say, keep it to yourself because we don't care about your bullshit. And this is quote unquote safe place to have hard conversation. I know I hate using that word, and there's gonna be people who are mad at me for saying safe space, but it is what it is. Also, a lot of you guys are watching the videos and telling me that you like the videos, but you're not subscribing to the channels, which is kind of frustrating. It makes me feel bad about myself. So please hit that subscribe button so it can get my ego boost for the week. All right, let's start at the good old childhood. How do you feel like your childhood was overall? And I'm talking like early childhood.
Well, I mean, you can only remember so far back, but overall childhood, I think in the grand scheme of things went decently well. Yeah. I mean, everybody has their shit to work through, but here we are. So.
Yeah. What's like your earliest memory?
I remember our other brother going to grab me on the end of the bed when I was falling off. That's about it, though.
Yeah.
That's my earliest memory, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, obviously everyone doesn't know this, but we come from an interesting family where, like most American family these days, where there's a lot of like half brothers, step brothers, that whole deal. So, you grew up, you're obviously, you're 5 years younger than me?
Yeah, I'm 25, so whatever.
So you're 6 years younger than me? I'm 31.
Yeah.
So obviously you and I've said obviously 14 fucking times. We've had different types of childhoods. I had different experiences than you, but you said overall you felt like your childhood was pretty good. Yeah. Yeah,
for the most part. I mean, we've all had our shit, or we had our ups and downs. I definitely struggled in middle school and high school. I mean, I've felt like I've struggled my whole life, but as far as what anybody else could provide me, like childhood was decent, you know? Like I had fun also. It wasn't always just a shit show.
Yeah, I feel like we had good times growing up.
Yeah, we did.
Specifically you and me and like, just the rest of the brothers, like we fucked around a lot.
Yeah, we did.
We have a video of us playing on like it had to have been around Christmas sometime, right?
Probably.
And we would play this game in this unfinished concrete basement where we'd have M start on one side of the concrete basement and sprint across, and then we would stand on the other side with objects on.
Dude, it was Jackass.
yeah. That we called it. It was like when Jackass came out, and we called this like our Jackass movie, and we had a recorder, and you would run from one side to the other, and we'd see who could hit you with what object that we'd be whipping at you. And I had the camera, and I was recording one time, and M ran by, and Cage threw
a big ass
pillow, and I had the camera, and it hit the camera directly, and the camera came back and hit me in the eye, and I had this big ass black eye.
Good, because my face hit that pavement a couple of times.
Dude, there was a couple times. We were just talking about this yesterday. Dude, we beat the shit out of you. You were a durable ass kid.
I was very durable. For the most part, it was fun.
And I feel like you were definitely a tomboy. And this will transition the conversation into kind of what we're getting into is when you came out as gay, because you came out gay before you came out as trans. I feel like you were like and maybe this is my opinion, I feel like you were the last one to know. Like, I remember you coming out and I'm being like, yeah, duh. You know, like, obviously you're gay as fuck.
You fucking assholes.
I'm like, and do you remember that conversation? Having that conversation?
I don't remember having the conversation, but I remember, yeah, feeling like the last one to know. And I was like, really, you guys? You couldn't have fucking helped me out? Just because.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, I was in middle school. I knew for a while that I was at least bi. And then later on in high school, I ended up dating girls. But yeah.
I remember I was like on my way to go pick up some girl or go hang out with some friends or something. And I remember like at our house, it was very common for people to go in the garage. And that's when you know there's like serious talks happening, because my mom would smoke cigarettes in the garage, and we would talk about the stressful shit in the garage so that mom could smoke cigarettes. And you would always know if, like, you didn't see people for a while and they were in the garage, like, oh, shit, don't go in the garage. Like, there's some stressful shit going down in the garage. And I remember you guys were in the garage for a hot minute. And then all of a sudden you come in and you're like, Chase, can I talk to you? And I'm, like, walking out the door and you're like, I just want you to know that I'm gay. And I literally looked at you and I'm like, yeah. Like, yeah, okay, all right. Like, we love you. Doesn't matter. And we just, like, kept on moving. And that was it. It was, like, literally, like, a 30-second conversation.
Yeah. Sometimes
I look back on that and wish I would have talked to you more about that, because I felt like I just like rubbed it. I didn't want, I'm sure for you that was like a very important part of your life, like a very like important situation and conversation to have. And I just kind of like was like, so nonchalant about it. And it bothers me because I was like, I had the opportunity to ask you questions and talk to you about things, but I didn't want to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah. For me, honestly, for the fact that I can't even remember that happening, I wasn't necessarily worried about what my brothers would think or whatnot. Like, I was pretty comfortable telling you guys just because I knew you guys would support me pretty much in anything. And it was like, you guys love women, so I didn't think it was going to be that far-fetched for me to also say the same thing.
Yeah.
But I don't remember ever craving or wishing you would have said more.
No, that's good. No, because that's something that I've regretted and thought about. Like, man, I had the opportunity to like have a deep conversation and I just brushed it off. I just, again, didn't want to make you feel awkward about it. I wanted it to feel as like seamless as possible for you. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we come from a family where being gay is like the least
of our worries.
Least of our worries, you know, like it's like fuck that, you know.
No, that's so true.
And so I feel like you kind of, and I've talked about this with Emma before, like I feel like you're in like the perfect family, like perfect, our immediate family is like the perfect family to be gay in, because like we just don't give a fuck about pretty much anything.
Yeah, that's so true.
Not that anyone should give a fuck about anything, but it's like there's obviously a lot of kids out there who want to come out or want to say certain things and they can't because they'll be ridiculed or, I mean, even worse in a lot of situations, you know?
Yeah, kicked out, whatever it may be. And that was never a situation for me, thankfully. Yeah.
So when did you start to like click in your brain? You're like, oh shit, I might be gay.
That I might be gay?
Yeah.
I for sure knew by middle school. I think still in elementary school I had boy crushes and stuff. And to a certain extent, if you're feeling that way, it just feels like, oh, normal. So it wasn't until middle school that I really was like, oh, I might be a little bit different. And that's when it kicked in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then after you came out as gay to the family, did you come out at school right away? Or did you come out at school first to your friends?
I don't remember. I didn't actually come out where everybody knew, or it was, I mean, I guess it was obvious to family, but where everybody knew until probably high school, because that's when I dated people. I tried coming out once, but then I was advised to retract that, and I did. So middle school, I was pretty much just in the closet, as they would say, until probably sophomore year, freshman year, and then I just didn't care anymore, because I was very, what's the word, promiscuous in high school. So
yeah. When you said you were advised to retract that statement, who advised that?
I'd say it was a family member. Yeah. but I just don't. I haven't gone through it myself that much, so I just don't want to dive into it.
Gotcha. So it was a person who's been through the situation, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
So it's their opinion held weight. It wasn't just like a, you better not tell people you're gay type thing.
Yeah, it was more of to protect me at that point in time, was to protect me and whatever I might face. But I always look back on that and just wish I would have pushed harder to just come out earlier, because it wasn't worth it to just keep it in.
Why was it not worth it?
I think I was advised by a person who, it was a different time. Like, if you were to come out as gay or something, even at your age when you were in middle school, it would have been different than, I mean, things have just progressed so much. Like, kids now in middle school, when they come out, or sometimes they don't even come out, it's just a different world. And I think I would have been able to handle it in middle school. Mm-hmm. The pros would have outweighed the cons for me, because it just wasn't worth it to be in the closet per se, and to live a lie. It seems so drastic, but that's what it felt like, honestly.
So when would you consider yourself like fully out to the public?
High school.
High school?
Yeah.
And once you came out, did you deal with any backlash from your peers?
There was moments, I would say 8th grade, that, because I didn't fully come out, but people knew a little bit before that. I would say 8th grade, I faced the most backlash, and it was really just my girlfriends that were worried that I was going to like them or something. Yeah, that's really what it was. That's the most backlash I really had. Other than that, I could fend for myself if people were saying shit, just stupid shit. Mm-hmm. I either didn't care, or they just wouldn't say it to me because I was intimidating, because I grew up with brothers and I was very on the defense most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, you were definitely like by that time I was like, we were boxing. Like I was boxing, so I know I was punching you in the face. I know that I would come home from boxing and I'd be like, put on the gloves and beat the shit out of you.
Yeah.
So, which sounds super fucked up, but like that was really normal for us to like train.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I was like bullying you. It was like, all right, let's learn how to fight so that you can defend yourself. And then you went on to fight, and then it was, so it worked out. You were definitely like we were talking about this the other night. Like you were definitely like an intimidating, at this point, girl. You were a very intimidating girl. Like you commanded respect. You weren't just like some meek and mild little girl. You were like you would beat the shit out of someone if they needed to get beat up.
Yeah.
But you were also not like an asshole.
Yeah, I tried my best to not be an asshole, because I knew what it felt like to be. Like, I would very much stand up for somebody before I would bully somebody, because I didn't want people to feel as shitty as I did in those times. Because middle school was probably the most depressed I've ever been in my life, which is saying something, because that's been a recurring issue. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want other people to feel like that. Mm-hmm. So that's just stayed consistent, where I, just fought, I guess.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that was like kind of like you had a caution sign around you was you weren't like, you would just say shit if you needed to, like you would call it exactly how you saw it. And I think that was very intimidating, and that is an intimidating fact. That is an intimidating trait for someone to have at any age, where you know that they'll call you on like exactly what your bullshit is, and it's not like they're making something up or they're like trying to attack you. It's like if you're lazy and they call you lazy, like it hits different because you know it's true. You know what I mean? And I feel like you had a way of doing that, and not in front of people on purpose, but like if someone was being a fucking douchebag, you would tell them that they're a fucking douchebag, but you would pinpoint certain things that made it so obviously clear that it cut a little deeper, if that makes sense.
Oh, for sure.
Like just a different level of like no bullshit.
Yeah, like 5th grade, I mean, it started really early. But 5th grade, there was this dude who was just an asshole through the whole year. And one of the last days of school, I remember, I think I had this chocolate milk that was in my desk for however long. Maybe it was a fresh one. I don't remember. But I wasn't on his bullshit. And it was the last weeks of school, 5th grade. We were about to go into middle school. And he just said some shit. And I just took my chocolate milk and I just poured it all over him, all over his head. Because he was pissing me off. I couldn't. So, yeah, it definitely started very young.
Hopefully it was new chocolate milk. Can you imagine getting old chocolate milk? But anyway, so obviously there's a point where you decide to transition, and I don't want to jump right into like the transitioning part. I want to talk about like all of the stuff that comes before that, right?
Yeah.
So you come out as gay. Then at what point do you start thinking to yourself, okay, maybe this is a little bit different than what I thought it was, and I actually want to start transitioning to be a man?
Yeah. Definitely the sexuality and gender things run into each other a lot. When I look back, I always knew I was a tomboy, but it took me a while to realize it was more than just being a tomboy. So there is the little indicators of whenever kids would just ask, "Hey, if you could be a boy tomorrow, right? Like just dumb shit. If you could be a boy tomorrow, would you? Like would you change?" Which is such an odd thing to ask, but kids are kids, so but I always 100% was like, "Duh, yeah, it's so much easier to be a guy." Whatever, like it seemed like an obvious answer to the question. But a lot of the times I started realizing my friends wouldn't say that. So I was like, that's interesting. But it was middle school. I was like, wow, I really am a tomboy. And then once I hit high school, I started looking it up, looking up how in different cultures they have different definitions of genders and whatnot. So yeah, it wasn't until high school. If that was your original
Yeah,
question, I can't
yeah.
remember.
When you started thinking about transitioning, even if it was just
Yeah.
a minor thought in your head.
Yeah, it was definitely high school. I started learning about all the terminology and whatnot, and why I might feel different more than just sexuality, liking girls and whatnot. I'm trying to think.
And when you say you were promiscuous, because you did mention that word earlier in this conversation, when you say that, what does that look like for you? Obviously, that means sleeping around, but does that mean like, were you sleeping around with guys, and girls? Like, was it, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, honestly, I would say it started in middle school. Like, I had an unhealthy thing of, I guess I was looking for that extra love and attention that I wasn't getting maybe elsewhere. So I actually presented myself as older in whatever it may be, like stupid chat rooms, whatever, when I was in middle school. So I always had that in me, like the hypersexuality part. And I'm surprised I didn't get kidnapped. That's probably because our mom was so helicoptery and just made me paranoid.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to let myself get kidnapped by some 30-year-old dude.
You were definitely the kid that had like mace bracelets and fucking
Oh, yeah.
brass knuckles in your fucking backpack and shit. Like you were
Yeah.
not getting kidnapped.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it started in middle school. I never met up with any older dudes, basically. But once I got into high school, I was in softball, and it was obvious what girls wanted because I was a girl at the time. And really, I slept with a lot of my teammates. I mean, that's how I met my wife, was softball. So,
Which is wild.
yeah. I mean, there was guys thrown into the mix here and there, but it was mainly just my teammates. I mean, we were teenagers.
No, for sure, but it's so funny because that's just the stereotype of softball players.
really
It's
is.
like they're all
They're all
lesbians.
super gay.
Yeah.
They aren't, but a lot of them
Yeah.
are a little bit.
Yeah. You gotta, try play the field, they say. So there comes a point where you do meet your wife, and you met your wife super young. I mean, I feel like she's been part of my life, my whole life, damn near, which is crazy. You guys have been together for a fucking minute. Did your guys' relationship, like, was it immediately like, oh, I want to be with this person, or was it like it started as friends and developed type of situation?
Oh, started as friends and developed. We were young. She'll say this too, but she was very much infatuated by me, and it was definitely a thing where she was chasing me a bit because I was a kid and wanted to do life.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, my teammates.
So how long after knowing Liz? I call her Lizbo. That's my nickname for her because I think it's fucking hilarious. I don't know if she likes it, but she's never corrected me. So Lizbo it is.
She likes that more than Lizzie Glizzy.
Oh god. So fuck, I forgot what I was even gonna ask.
Something about when we met.
Oh yeah, how long? And like this is a pretty this is a private thing, but like how long before you guys, you know, like started to, before you crossed that boundary into what you would be in a relationship in a way? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, when did it go from friendship to something a little more serious?
Yeah, I would say probably one of the softball sleepovers, which isn't too long after starting softball. Like, it was very fast moving thing as far as that aspect goes, but the relationship part came a bit later.
All right.
Yeah.
Nice. Since we're still in that high school era, like in your personal life and in like what you wanted to do for your career, did you start having thoughts about like, okay, this is what I want to do with my life? The thing is people don't know this about you. You're really fucking smart. You're like robot smart. And I wouldn't have been surprised if you would have been like, oh, I'm going to medical school. Oh, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. What were your thoughts as far as your career path? And did you being gay at this point were you worried about that affecting your career path in any way, shape, or form?
Did it have any weight?
Yeah.
I would say it took me a really long time to, like, I've always felt like I wasn't good enough. I know a lot of people say that.
Mm-hmm.
But it took me a really long time to realize that I was capable of almost anything that I wanted to do or commit my mind to, which I wish I would have realized it sooner in high school, because I didn't realize that in high school, because they always made being a doctor or doing these really high valued jobs, whatever it may be, to be so hard. But then I realized when I was going through things or learning things that I'm like, you guys are making this out to be some sort of godlike complex, when it's really, a lot of people could do these things, but you shy them away from it because they don't have, you know, straight A's in biology or something. I mean, I always pretty much did well in school, but yeah, that's the case. I guess as far as being gay and what weight that held, I didn't really feel like I was going to face prejudice for being gay, because it wasn't a case where it was super obvious.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to go to an interview, I guess I had short hair, but other than that, it wasn't a super obvious thing for me, so I didn't think it was going to get in the way. The only thing I thought might get in the way is me being trans, and that followed me till my latest job. It's always been a worry for me because I haven't changed my legal name. Like, my legal name is Emma. So whenever I'm on the phone, people call me that because that's what it says in all my documents, records, whatnot. And I'll change my name eventually, but it just hasn't been at the top of my priority list. But when you see my job application, I put M in parentheses, but I put my legal name, Emma. So it's just that confusion factor. I guess it automatically gives me I'm only going to get an interview really if the workplace is at least somewhat accepting, probably. So I have no doubt that it's probably limited some of my opportunities, but usually when I can get into an interview room, I just prove my way and I can win somebody over, however it may be. Or I feel like it's really hard to dehumanize somebody when you're face to face with them.
Definitely.
So if I get that opportunity, it's usually like a done deal.
Speaking of job applications, when you check the box, you know, there's the gender box. What would you check?
Well, I guess, I mean, a lot of job applications, they don't necessarily put that on there, but when there's other forms and stuff, a lot of places have a third option. I know a lot of times they didn't, so I'll put, if it's really asking for my birth sex, I just put female. It happens a lot in the medical field, but the medical field is starting to catch up because they have to. So I'll put, if they have a third option, I'll put on there like trans male. Sometimes they'll have a write-in. Minnesota, they actually have on your license, you can put an X. So I have an X on my license. So I don't know what people think when they see that, if they know what it is or whatever. But yeah, you can basically put an X on it. Because why does it matter? Yeah, why would it matter? Yeah. What your sex or gender is on your license? It really plays no factor. I guess if you were in the quote-unquote wrong bathroom, it might play a factor, but I don't really see how it matters.
Yeah. Kind of switching topics here a little bit, but I definitely want to touch on this just because it's interesting as well. Obviously, you dealt with my addiction growing up a lot because it was just a common problem. It was just like always an issue when we were growing up. How do you feel like my addiction affected you at that age, and B, in the long run?
Yeah. I remember pretty young, we went to a group, like a family therapist, a group therapist when you were in treatment one of the times. And I remember what I said because I was pretty young. I was elementary school. And I think I said my feelings for once, and that was never really asked because I feel like our parents were busy with you, really busy with you. And I never was really asked how I felt about stuff or how I was doing as far as watching you and what you were going through. And it was like just told, you know, don't do some of the things your brother does. So that was hard. But in that therapy, I think I had expressed my feelings. And at that point in time, it seemed like it really affected you or at least held some weight. And it was just nice to be heard in that moment. I think in general, seeing you hurt or go through a lot of things has definitely affected me in a bunch of different ways, but it hasn't been at the forefront of my mind. I guess I really dealt with a lot of my own shit, and that definitely played some weight because I think, especially in my formative years of elementary school, a lot of that attention was shifted towards you because there was no other. So I probably wasn't getting enough attention to help me form as a human being as I probably should have. And that's why I am part of the reason I am so hyper independent as I've grown up.
Did you ever feel unsafe because of my addiction and how I was when I was growing up? Not directly me, but like there would be times where there was just like we were like there was a lot of fights, like verbal fights and physical fights. Like me and Cage, we would just fist fight randomly. And B, there was people who were just like pulling up to the house and we would just fist fight in the front yard. That's loser shit. I'm not saying this because I think I'm a tough guy. I don't think I'm a tough guy. I hate this shit. I think it's fucking loser shit to be a violent person. I think you should figure out a way to handle your problems a different way. At this point in my life, I was very explosive and I just handled everything. I met everything with violence and aggression. And that violence and aggression literally would show up on my front door a lot of the time. And you would see these things. You would see us, me and Cage, or just me sometimes, or just Cage sometimes, fighting people in our front yard.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, it was more entertaining. Like, it was more of a drama thing in my head than it was that I actually ever felt unsafe or scared.
Yeah.
That is kind of funny that you bring that up because I don't remember feeling unsafe, honestly. The least of my worries was like physical hurt. When you're dealing with so much shit in your brain, I really don't think physical pain is like, it's just really is the least of my worries.
Right. Mental torture is so much stronger than physical torture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it wasn't a thing for me. I would say it was more entertaining than anything. And I would say I felt pressure to be, like, that was the embodiment in my brain as a kid. That was the embodiment of strength, and you should be able to fend for yourself as far as a fight goes. So that definitely formed some of my ideas about masculinity, which is something to work through. Even though I'm still very in touch with like my feminine side or value feminine traits and things like that. But it's played an aspect for sure.
Interesting. Just to hit on some of the buzz questions that everyone asks. Do you think you were born gay? And do you think you were born gay / trans?
So the gay thing, I identify as pansexual, which if people don't know, it's just kind of, for a lot of people, I'm not speaking for all pansexual people, but I tend to be attracted to or fall in love with the person, not their gender. And it makes sense why that wouldn't matter to me because who I am as a trans person, like I feel like that almost automatically makes me pansexual because if I'm different, then it kind of makes all my relationships different. But I would say it can be a choice. I guess that is possible. But for the most part, I think one of the best arguments for it not being a choice is a lot of people wouldn't just choose that hardship. Why would you, like, there's really no point to choose that hardship. You're not, some people would say attention, but that's not worth it. Cutie Batman boy.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, as far as being trans, there's definitely some choices within that. I always used to say that I felt a certain percentage of boy or girl or woman or man, and I still do feel that way. I've always thought if I could just switch every day in the morning, I would. But some days I just feel so much more in touch with my feminine self, I guess. Like I still have dreams about me having long hair, and it's really I think for some people it is so cut and dry, black and white. They're just like, I'm completely in the wrong body, but that wasn't the case for me. I wish it was in some ways. I wish I did just know that from the get-go, but it's been a lot longer of a journey. Like there's a lot of pros and cons to weigh in my transition. I didn't know. It wasn't like I was 5 years old and I knew that I was a boy, you know. Some people will say that, but it was never that cut and dry for me. I always knew I was a tomboy, but it wasn't like that.
Going back to the hair thing, which is the least important thing out of all the shit you just said. I remember you had such beautiful hair.
Yeah.
Like, I remember being a bald guy. Like, I started balding so fucking young, and then I was like shaving my head like immediately as soon as I started balding. So I've been bald since I was like 16, damn near. And I remember you cutting off your hair, and I'm just like, this motherfucker. I'm like, you lucky son of a bitch, and you're cutting it all off.
Oh, I miss it too. Trust me.
All right, well, that's interesting. The other question that I think people are going to ask or wonder about is, with you growing up in a pretty hyper masculine family, do you think that pulled you towards the choice of transitioning into a man?
I've always been curious about that. With our mom having ultimately 4 boys, because including me, but other than that it was 3 and then 1, I really think her body is just really pulling hella testosterone. And that has to play some some role in that. I guess it's the whole nature versus nurture thing. I'm sure it has played some role. It's shaped what I think it is to be a man, having brothers. It would be interesting if I would have grown up with 3 sisters, how much I would have felt a certain way. I feel like it would have swayed me a little bit, but it does feel ingrained in me that it's the wires are crossed in my brain. Yeah, it's a hard thing to dissect for sure.
I know me personally, I don't have like a shit ton of gay friends, and you're the only trans person I actually know personally. Like, I know of trans people, but I've noticed on TikTok, because this is where I get a lot of my information, which is fucking disgusting, but it's the reality of the world where we live in. I notice on TikTok a lot, like, if there's 2 older sisters, the brother will be gay. Which sounds crazy, right? But, like, I've noticed this a lot. And I'm not saying that makes them gay. Like, I'm not saying that, but it's just, like, it makes you wonder, you know? Like, when it comes down to, like, biology and how all of that works, like, is there something to that? Something
going on there.
Yeah, you know. Yeah. But either way, so eventually you go on to graduate high school. And I feel like I feel like you graduated high school early. Or am I tripping?
I didn't. I was in more, I did it was like college type courses. So I did do some things early, but I didn't graduate early. It was just pretty normal. I remember it as normal high school life. I definitely aspired for more. I always wish I would have done PSAO, you know, college and high school type thing 2 years early, got my associates in high school. I always wanted more for myself, but sometimes I just couldn't do it quick enough. Especially, I mean, I got 2 concussions in middle school, so it's hard for me I don't know how that affected me, but I've been told that it kind of changed my personality a bit, but there's no way for me to know because obviously when your brain changes, it's hard to kind of look back on that.
Yeah, I feel you. Eventually you make the choice to go into the military.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that choice?
If that's one of the things, if I were to go back, I probably wouldn't have done it, because in some ways it was a waste of, 3 years, but in other ways I did have some great times and moments in the military. I've always said it's a great thing for some people, but it was absolutely fucking horrendous for me. Just the aspect of when I got done with boot camp and job training, I was in an environment that it was all white cis men, which cis is it's CIS, is when you're born a male and you just live as a male. You don't feel differently than that. White cis Republican men, and that's just not really what I identify with. So that was pretty detrimental to my mental health. And I had never, like when I first joined the military, I was encouraged to go off my meds, which was meds for ADHD and meds for anxiety and depression, which looking back on that's fucking terrible. Because to get through MEPS or the screening, you kind of have to be of sound mind, obviously, and of sound body. So I went off of my meds, and I wasn't back on any of my meds until I got back from job training. And then I think I was on maybe my anxiety and depression meds. Finally, I tell the psychiatrist, because we were probably a year out from a deployment, and I was like, if I go on deployment, I'm not coming back. And it's not, this is what I told this psychologist, because they have to interview you and do all these prep stuff for deployment. And I said, if I go out there, I'm not coming back, and it's definitely not because I'm getting blown up or shot or some shit. It's because I will kill myself. It's just not, there was no way in my mind that I was going to survive just being away from everything, which sounds shitty, but like I had the strength to fight for my country. I had gone through all the training and whatnot, but I've struggled so hard with my brain that there was just no way I was doing that. So that's when I talked to my captain and everything, and they were like, well, we want people that want to be here, right? And we had somebody who had committed suicide, I think a few months prior, so it was taken pretty seriously at that point, because it can be pretty stigmatized. He was like, yeah, I'll help you, like, whatnot, kind of ease out of the military, really, because that's a really stigmatized thing, getting out of the military. It's a very difficult thing to do. There is easy ways to do it, but you're very much encouraged not to, obviously. There's a lot that goes on with that, and I've never felt like I've been a quitter, and that's why I stayed in for so long, honestly.
And I think that's probably why your captain made it easier for you to get out and helped you, is because it's different when there's someone who comes into a situation and they're just fucking dragging their feet and being lazy, and then they're like, I want to quit. It's like, fuck you, dude. No, you're going to see this through, you little bitch.
Yeah.
And then there's someone who's like you, where it's like you put 100%, 110% effort into everything that you do, and then you're like, dude,
I tried.
I'm trying to do this. You don't understand. Like, you need to understand, like, my brain isn't going to allow this. And, like, for some people, they're like, oh, that's blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, if you were part of the situation, you would understand that, like, there's life and death situations going on here outside of the military part that you wouldn't have made for. I mean, you probably would have made for a good soldier because you wouldn't have given a shit about your life, but that's not what they need out there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think that obviously you made the right choice by doing what you did. Yeah, and also, do you feel like you being, at this point, would you have considered yourself trans or gay, or what would you identify, or pansexual at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I was pansexual probably at the end of high school, and since then, honestly, my sexuality hasn't played as big of a role in my life as being trans has, for sure. I think for some people it could, but yeah, I identified as pansexual in the military, and I had short hair. It's kind of a normal thing for there to be at least lesbians in the military.
Right.
So I would say I was probably viewed as a lesbian or something, but I didn't really come out as trans until after the military. So I don't think I started transitioning until, like, as far as taking testosterone, maybe when I was 20 or 21.
So let's skip it.
Late.
Let's skip ahead to that then. When did you mentally make that choice, and what goes into making that choice once you actually want to take the physical action of becoming a person who transitions?
Yeah, I would have transitioned earlier if it wasn't for the military. Because if we think back, this was when I was in training. It was 2020. Trump had got elected, and there was a lot of. I didn't even know if it was legal at that time because there was a lot of talks. I didn't even know if it was legal, if I was going to be able to get testosterone when I was in the military. So I definitely remember feeling the want and need to transition that early on, and it was in my brain to do that, and it was even in my brain to do it in high school, but it just never happened, I guess. But yeah, I felt the want and need to do that while I was in the army, but didn't until I got out. So it was really a waiting game. I was like, I pretty much know I'm going to do this once I'm done with the military.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. I remember I wanted to look like my brothers.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the biggest things I
Sexy
can
as
remember.
hell, motherfucker.
Jesus.
Sorry, I had to say it.
No, that was my idea of masculinity, and it still kind of is like what I strive for. I mean, it's not super bad thing to strive for.
No.
I mean, I've always wanted the tattoos, and you can do that as a girl. But something as stupid as hairy legs, like man hairy legs. We talked about this the other night, that it took me a while to figure out what I found attractive in men was more than just like what I found attractive in men. It was like what I wanted for myself.
Right. So like, to break that down, it was like you thought, oh, you want these like hyper masculine men that look this certain way and blah blah blah, but eventually it clicked in your brain. You're like, oh no, I don't want to date that. I want to be that, which I thought was super interesting because I've never heard you say that before, and I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, hell, I'll go for a guy that's hyper masculine, but but yeah, it really did translate to that. That's what I just strive for, and I'm not saying that men that aren't hyper masculine aren't men, quote unquote.
Yeah, or attractive. It's just
or attractive.
This is just for you. This is what it was.
Yeah, that's what has been in my brain. What that means.
So obviously you start to transition at some point, and you and Lisbo have to have a conversation. So Liz would identify as a pansexual, correct?
Yeah.
So either way, when Liz got into the relationship with you, you were a girl with long hair who you were. The thing is like, and a lot of people don't understand this. And I was just talking to my therapist the other day because he asked me, he found out you were trans and said that had to have bothered you in some kind of way or had to have made you feel some type of way. And I was like, what you don't understand is M has been the exact same person through and through this whole time. So it wasn't like you were some hyper feminine girl and then all of a sudden one day you clap your hands and you're a hyper masculine man. It was like you've just been the same person the whole time. So you looking a certain way or whatever, like it didn't play a factor in how I felt at all. It was like a very seamless transition in my brain. Like, it didn't matter to me at all.
Yeah, I was living pretty authentically as far as what I wore and how I dressed, cut my hair and whatnot. But I was in the closet, but I wasn't super in the closet as far as being trans went. I totally understand that. For some people, they do have to hide, honestly, or they have to stay in the closet for however long. So I'm sure when they do come out, it's like seeing a different type of person. But I totally understand that it was just seamless. Oh, coming back to Liz.
How did she feel about you transitioning? And did she feel like she was losing like the old you, quote unquote, or how did that go? Yeah,
that's kind of funny. We have talked about that. We never really had, that I can remember, a sit-down conversation of, hey babe, I'm actually a guy type thing. She just has been there for me along the whole journey, that she's just known the whole way, and she never gave up on me, I guess. It's never changed the way she's loved me. And I would let her speak for herself, but she has just relayed this information to me. It wasn't a thing. And I'm very, very, very thankful for that, because I'm sure with some people, I could totally understand and I would respect her decision if she said, well, I fell in love with a woman, I fell in love with a girl with certain parts and they looked a certain way. I don't think I can keep moving forward, but I wouldn't doubt that she would have at least been my best friend. I would have respected that decision if she said she couldn't do it or keep loving me, but she has. So
yeah, no, I feel like as far as partner in life goes, you got lucky. Not
yeah.
There's a lot of shitty people, obviously, but I feel like it's even harder. There's a lot of not even shitty, just like non-accepting, non-progressive thinking, not thinkers at all. There's people in this world who just don't use their fucking brain, and I feel like as far as what you got out of a partner with her is very unique and hard to find, like someone who just genuinely unconditionally loves you. no matter what the situation is, and is like going to stand by your side. It doesn't matter what the situation is at.
Yeah.
That's really, really hard to find.
I guess that's one way to really test if you're or pansexual or bisexual, I guess, is be like, do you have a partner that's transitioning? And that's kind of a telltale way. If you keep loving them, you really did fall in love with that person.
Right.
Them as a human being. You didn't fall in love with their body parts or whatnot, which I understand only being attractive to certain body parts. But
and that was super helpful for me the other night when we were sitting around talking about the whole pansexual thing, and I gave that definition, or I gave that breakdown of what I said to my therapist about how, like, you were always the same and I always just loved you, and I never understood the pansexual thing because in my mind it is a little bit black and white, and I'm getting better about it, but I didn't understand the pansexual thing. And then when Liz was like, that is my definition of pansexual, exactly what you just said, like, you loved M either way and you didn't really see a difference, like,
Yeah.
that's how I feel about being pansexual, and like
Yeah.
how I feel about sexual partners or whatever. And that's super interesting, and that was helpful for me to understand and wrap my head around the pansexual thing. So that was nice. I feel like we've had some amazing conversation this vacation. Obviously, I live in Florida, and I'm definitely a progressive leaning conservative, if that's even fucking possible. But like, I moved to Florida for a fucking reason. I believe a lot of the things that people in Florida believe, but I also care a lot about you and your life experience and the people in your position, because I've seen how difficult this can be. And like, I'm not like I'm not like your typical Florida man. And I don't think there's a lot of people like in Florida. I think there's a lot of people in Florida now specifically who are more like me, where they are like those progressive conservatives in a way. Don't get me wrong. There's some very not progressive conservatives here, but I don't know where I was going with this, but
I can touch on something.
yeah.
Given that train of thought, I think with all the legislation and everything going on in Florida, I just wish a lot of people, if I had the chance to sit down and talk with people who don't personally know a trans person, or people say, oh, I've never met a trans person before, there's really no way for you to know that, because a lot of people are quote unquote passing. So, I mean, you're only going to remember somebody. A lot of times people remember people who are only a quarter way through their transition. So they're like, oh yeah, I can clock them type shit. So I just wish I could sit down with a lot of these people that don't have a personal connection with somebody who's trans. You can't tell me, if you sit down with me, I'm sure there's plenty of people that would still hate me after having a conversation with me, but I can have a conversation with somebody and usually get to some point where they're like, oh, it starts to make sense. Like, I'm not somebody who fucking abuses kids. Like, it's not this weird dynamic. People really intertwine sex, gender, and sexuality. That's not necessarily the case. There's plenty of straight trans people, you know? I just wish I had the luxury of having that conversation with a lot of people.
Well, the news does a good job of, and social media does a good job of villainizing trans in general, and it's so fun how much people care about these things that don't affect them at all. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like people put their heart and soul into hating trans people because they have this image in their head of what a trans person is, and it's like, dude, it's not like that.
It really isn't.
It's like, no, they're not trying to come into your kid's school and kidnap your kids. They're not trying to push an agenda. They're not trying to do anything. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's people on both sides trying to push agendas.
Yeah.
There is the exception to everything, right? But for 99.9% of the trans community, they just want to live their life and be happy.
Seriously.
It's like, just, that's it, you know?
Yeah.
And like, obviously having a trans brother, like, I've been able to see a lot of this firsthand.
Yeah.
And it's just really sad to see these people hate so much something that they have never even come across to their knowledge. Like, they have no experience in something, and they're just so judgmental, and it's wild to me.
I can't say that being trans hasn't shaped my viewpoint in life, obviously.
Right.
Because if I wasn't trans, I would probably have a lot of different viewpoints. So I'm thankful for the fact that I am, because I can open other people's eyes through conversations, like I said. I can't remember where I was going with that.
I think that this does lead into a good question here. and another one of those buzz questions. What do you think that there is space in the school system for conversations about being trans? Do you think that we're doing a good job in general? Do you think we're doing a bad job?
Yeah. I mean, overall in this whole conversation, I don't speak for all trans people, but I'd say a lot of people might agree with me, and I speak for myself, my own personal experiences, right? As far as conversations in school regarding trans people in general or how kids identify, whatever it may be, I think it's important to ask kids, at least in middle school, just, I mean, putting on their sheet when they write, when their first day of school, you do the stupid intro week, shit like that. Just, is it really that hard to write pronouns, or you circle he, him, or she, her, or I guess any of the other alternatives, which I'm not super familiar with. It's really not that hard. In what way does that affect you? Some people might say that confuses children, but I think if there's confusion about who they are and their gender, I'm not talking about their sex, their gender, that they're going to have the confusion other way. It's not like, just because they're being prompted with the question of what are your pronouns, I don't think that really drives anything, to be honest. I think until kids hit puberty, I don't think being trans or sex and gender is usually on the minds of children, except for when it's pushed from the outside, which I guess could also be well, why would you put pronouns in the sheet type thing? But before puberty, I really think kids should just be kids. I agree with that, and I think a lot of people, especially conservative people, would agree with that statement because they've said it, in regards to sexuality and whatnot. Like, kids should just be able to be kids. But that also means we can't ignore the fact that when they're young, I mean, these are their formative years, and if you have them growing up never even hearing of any of these ideas or concepts or how other people live their lives, then it's going to be so foreign to them that they might end up being very hateful or maybe hateful of themselves because they happen to end up being trans or gay or something. And I don't think that's fair. Like, I don't want kids to feel like they need to kill themselves because they don't see other people like them, or they don't interact with other people like them, or they haven't heard of somebody like them. It's definitely a fine balance, for sure.
Yeah. I know that when I was a kid, I grew up in a very tiny, small, white town where everyone thought the same. And I don't necessarily, like, I remember, like, hearing racist shit, like, jokes and blah, 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 and whatnot. And, like, it made me racist, Like, I grew up, someone's going to clip that, and it's going to be, it made me racist. And, like, that's not it. Trust me, I grew. But until I had an image of what minorities were in my head until I moved to Minneapolis, and then my first friend was black. And it was like, oh, like, just going off of that point where, like, you need to understand everything. Like, not understand everything, obviously, but you need to be subjected to certain things so that you can understand.
Exactly.
Like, I would have just been racist at some point if I would have never, like, met a black person, and I would have had this image in my head of what a minority was, and that's not how it is. And then, I just think it's important that there is at least room for discussion and exploration, and I don't necessarily think that we need to be, like, shoving fucking certain things down people's throats when they're young, but I do think that there needs to be room for conversation and self-exploration.
Like, we're not reading books to first graders about straight people having sex or gay people having sex.
Right.
If you have two princesses on the cover of a fucking book, it's just two princesses on the cover of a fucking book. It's not like we're pushing anything more than, or pushing anything, but it's not like we're pushing anything more than you would if it was a straight couple or maybe somebody different. If you make these things seem, I guess that's part of the scary part for some people, but if you make these things seem normal, it's not that scary. It's like, can you remember even, I'm not trying to draw big parallels between being a minority in the LGBT community or being a minority in general as far as race goes, but do you ever remember when you were a kid reading something as simple as a kid's book with a black kid on the front or a black person on the front? Like, we've come ways. We're still trying to integrate diversity into what kids read. Something as simple as that, let alone curriculum.
Yeah. And I do think that a lot of people will jump right to the defensive, and they think that, like, again, an agenda is being pushed, and it's not. That's just not how it goes. But if you watch the news and you're gullible enough, you're gonna have this image in your head of what trans people are and, like, this agenda, right? Like,
Yeah.
the news is there for a reason, and the news is owned by certain people who are pushing agendas, and you got to look past. Just don't be fucking stupid. Use your
Yeah.
goddamn brain. You think that these people are putting this shit up there without an agenda behind it? You don't think that they're trying to make people hate other people for a reason, conquer it? Like, we can go off on conspiracy theories all fucking day, but, like, the reality of the situation is there's white versus black, red versus blue. Like, there's a very clear thing, a clear line that's being drawn, and there's more to it than what meets the eye. And I think we just got to be smart enough to use our own brains. And there's got to be a point where, as a human, you just try to have a little bit of compassion and open your mind a little bit, because that's no way to live as a closed-minded individual.
To jump off of the compassion thing, and a huge misconception I'd like to address is trans people are grooming, or gay people are grooming children. That it's whatever we're doing as far as, like, making children's books where kids see different types of people. It comes from a place of compassion, where I think a lot of us, I'm not trying to speak for us, but, like, it comes from a place of compassion and wanting kids literally to not kill themselves. Like, that's, I would say, for a lot of my ideas, that's where it comes from. That's where my compassion comes from, is I don't want children to feel like they shouldn't exist on this earth. And why would people do this? Why would you ever tell a child you should go kill yourself? I can't, no matter who they are, I'm just not going to say it. And that's really what it is. It's not grooming children. It just comes from a place of compassion. It's never been a thought anymore. I'm sure there's fucked up people out there, obviously, that are in any community. But
I feel like it's important to move in and speak in generalities, because the exception's always going to be there, and, like, we can't sit and focus on exceptions. The reality of the situation is most trans people aren't out there grooming kids. Most gay people aren't out there grooming kids. And most straight people aren't out there grooming kids.
Yeah.
Really what it comes down to is you just have that compassion, and you want to make sure that these kids don't kill themselves. You want them to know that it's okay if you are gay and you feel these certain things, and that you're not alone, because there's probably your fucking best friend might be feeling the same thing, you know? Like, there's a whole lot to that conversation.
Yeah.
We kind of got off topic, but I really wanted to talk to you about the process of transitioning from a medical aspect.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that your doctors, and I don't hope that you don't mind that I say this.
I think it should be fine.
They did not put enough tender love and care and education into your situation, and that really bothers me, because when you're talking about hormones, coming as a man who has went through, like, men's clinics and shit, and how much detail they put into making sure that you're not going to have a fucking heart attack, and that the lack of care that you were given is mind-blowing to me. There's not really a question there, that's a statement, but the question is how did that process go for you?
Yeah.
And do you feel all right about the situation that was provided to you?
I would say, when we first started talking about how you deal with your blood work and health, and how it's a lot more, I guess, maintained and really taken care of, how that's different from mine, that was a big wake-up call, and it was really disappointing to hear, as far as my medical care should probably be better, honestly. I mean, I guess it's not super surprising, but it is disappointing. When I first started my transition, and really along my whole journey, I've always educated myself for the most part. I've always researched myself or looked things up myself, because I'm okay with learning. But some people don't have the initiative to do that, which makes it sad. So I knew some of the risks of transitioning, as far as, I figured I was going to get male pattern baldness, or there's a lot of the side effects of testosterone that you want, as far as excessive hair growth everywhere else. The thing, like my voice deepening, obviously I wanted that to happen, but it wasn't made super apparent to me that some of the negative effects were going to happen. Like I'll be super open, like vaginal atrophy. Look it up. And I would love for medical professionals to chime in here, but I wasn't aware of how likely that would be to happen. It just puts a damper on life. Like it's pretty intense shit. Or as far as like I got a mastectomy, which is basically taking away your boobs. Similar process to how breast cancer patients get their breast tissue removed. You lose all nipple sensation. Like these are shitty things you have to deal with. And sometimes it's not super apparent what's going to happen. Like they don't really warn you that much. As far as keeping up on blood work, I get my blood work done every 6 months, and my cholesterol is super bad, and testosterone can make it worse. And I get it. It's upon me to really help that situation, but also medical professionals don't show that much concern. Like this is one of the things you're talking about, keeping my heart healthy. Is there just hasn't, it seems like there's not enough education in the medical field for trans people. And I would say that I would really love some doctors to say or provide their experience in or maybe students that are going through it now. Is there like one trans person course? Like how do there's got to be some sort of training, right? But they're really, as far as I know, there's not like some big trans certification thing. It's really hard to find doctors who are experienced with hormone replacement therapy. You'll hear about sex and gender clinics, but that's about it. It's really hard to find medical care for sure.
What's interesting is a lot of the doctors who do know a lot about the hormonal side of this, which is a lot of it, obviously, they end up stopping general practice or common practice or however you would label that, and they just open their a hormone clinic because it's like, why deal with all this other stuff when I can focus my attention on men's health?
Oh, yeah.
And they go into men's health specifically, and they open their own hormone clinic, and then they are dialed in on what you need to do to make sure that you don't have heart attack, you don't have stroke, you don't have blood clots, you don't have, all these different things. So they're focusing a lot on like the men's health portion.
Cis
like,
people.
Cis people, yeah. And I get my blood work done constantly, right?
Yeah.
And it's just crazy because you got to think you're taking this hormone that men naturally produce and you're putting it in a man, and you're putting like 100% focus on like the care aspect and making sure that you're super delicate and that the blood work numbers are always right. But then when they give it to a person who's transitioning, they're like, here, take this and fucking figure it out. And it's like, whoa, dude. Like to me, when I hear that, it's so disappointing. So it's like, do you not give a fuck? It takes very little for the body to fail you when it comes to hormones. People just die. Like that is the thing that just happens a lot. Young, healthy men will take hormones and die. So when you're talking about someone who's transitioning, you got to put some level of care into it, dude. You can't just throw someone a bottle of testosterone and say, fucking go wild. It's crazy to me that they just don't care.
Yeah.
And then that's in a progressive state like Minnesota.
True.
Imagine transitioning in a place like fucking Florida.
I don't even know. I guess this shows my ignorance, but I don't even know if you're able to do that here.
Yeah.
Like I can't imagine trying to find a doctor who does hormone replacement therapy in Florida.
Yeah.
I'm sure there is.
Well,
I mean,
there
out
is
there,
Miami,
but like,
and there is very like blue areas of Florida, but like if you're transitioning to Fort Myers, Florida, best of luck to you,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just frustrating hearing that, and obviously caring about you and loving you and not wanting something bad to happen to you, and hearing that there's doctors out there that are just like, eh.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
The accessibility
sad.
to good medical care for a lot of people, not just trans people, is low access is what it is. It is interesting you say the men's clinic thing, because I never thought about, instead of going to like a sex and gender clinic, never thought about going to like a men's clinic, which I'm sure some of the doctors, it would take so much more work. I would have to call up and be like, is this something you have experience with? Would you be comfortable accepting a patient that's trans? You would think as a doctor that would be kind of it's gross to say this, but like a good challenge almost. But I guess I would trust my endocrinology with a men's clinic person. That'd be a good pathway.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's something that you should actually look into because I know, at least in Minnesota, at Everest Men's Health, a lot of it was covered under health insurance.
Yeah.
I was paying out of pocket for it, and it was super expensive. But I do think that they were dialed in and they knew what the fuck they were talking about, and they were on the blood work and they cared about their patients, and they made sure that no one was having a heart attack on their watch, which is the opposite of what's happening for you. So when you first started the transition process, was there like a lot of like quote unquote roadblocks? Did you have to go to a therapist of some sort and have conversations? Did you have to get the approval by someone in the medical field?
This is a good train of thought discussion point. So it was pretty easy for me to get testosterone because I was so sure in my decision. I think if I were younger, there would have been a lot of more questions along the way. Mm-hmm. But my doctor, when I found a gender doctor, basically, it was surprisingly easy to get testosterone. But I could see why it would be in my situation because it was very obvious. I was very definitive in my decision. So that wasn't, getting testosterone in and of itself was not a hard thing. I would say the hardest thing was my mastectomy. And it was, there's some guidelines you have to follow, and you have to get a email written basically from a psychologist saying that they're ready for this, or they can do this, they can get a mastectomy or change their body basically. And I'm kind of thankful for it because I could see how it could be a barrier, but also something that's needed. So you get this letter, you give it to the surgeon and everything, and then you have to work with insurance. And it was interesting. Insurance didn't know, they didn't have any specific policies. I had to talk to several different people through insurance because they didn't even have in the insurance something listed for that yet. They didn't even know if that would be covered. Mm-hmm. Getting mastectomy for gender dysphoria reasons. They didn't even know if that would be covered. So I had to like go up the ranks in these customer service people because they've never dealt with it before. Mm-hmm. So it is interesting, that aspect at least. That was a little bit of a barrier. It took extra energy and to get through that. Like I said, it's with the mastectomy, you just get the letter. And I think you have to be living as a man or living as your desired gender or sex for a certain period of time. I think it was a year, something. Yeah, which would really suck if you're like, no, I need this now. My mental health depends on it. I didn't like having boobs. It just made me feel, I mean, yeah, it's an interesting feeling. I still feel the same way about my hips. Like I very much have women hips. It's just the dysphoria feeling. I think a lot of people with body dysmorphia can at least relate to that somehow.
Mm-hmm, definitely. I know we were talking about this the other day, and I can definitely relate to that, where you focus so much on like this little thing that no one else is going to notice, but it's all you think about. Even if you're not looking at yourself in the mirror, if your shirt feels a certain type of way, it's like, oh, someone's going to notice this, blah, blah, blah. And it takes a lot of training, mental training, to get over that. It's very hard to get over body dysmorphia issues.
Yeah. And I don't think I could have trained myself to get over the, yeah, right. But this is a good leeway or a good pathway is I don't think I could have trained myself to get over the fact that I had boobs.
Yeah, there's certain things that's just like, all right, like that's a little bit too extreme to just like, if you had a fucking, no, I'm not going to say that. Someone out there has it, and it's not going to be good. That could have been bad. So, are you fully transitioned right now?
I think I think that's different for everybody.
By your standard, are you considered fully transitioned?
No,
for yourself.
I think it'll always be a journey, but for the most part, there's some things I still might do, but my first thing I want to do is get on hormones and get a mastectomy. And there's other things. Usually people say top surgery and bottom surgery because it's easier than saying other stuff. But I might do some form of bottom surgery eventually. But there's really not a lot of good options out there for trans guys. So that's just something that's on my mind. But for the most part, like I still need to change my name, and that's kind of important as far as it just makes things in life easier. All the stupid bureaucratic stuff like going to the DMV, or people get so confused on the phone sometimes. So just making that stuff easier. So I'm not 100% there, but I'd say I'm pretty deep into it.
Okay. So since you've transitioned, have you noticed a different reaction from the public in your just everyday interactions?
Yeah. For the most part, I am very passing, is what they would say. So I'd say a lot of people just view me as, they assume that I'm probably a cis white straight guy. And so I get those privileges as a white straight guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never once forgotten about my, perspective as a woman, but also my perspective and my lens of who I am today.
Mm-hmm.
I get treated differently for sure. Like I don't forget about the time. I just said this, but I don't forget about the time that when I was a girl versus now. I mean, I feel safer, honestly. I feel more privileged, especially as a white man. And if people don't know of my past and who I am, like it's not like I wear a fucking sticker on my head saying I'm trans, you know? So people are going to view me a certain way whether I like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a tool at some points. As far as I can tell people value my opinion more if I don't say I'm trans. Just the same way somebody is going to value a straight person's opinion on, let's say, a gay topic, because they're like, oh, you're like me. You can identify with this too. So maybe I should listen to you, you know? Like that's just human nature, is we listen to people who are like us, to be honest. So sometimes, you know, I don't always out myself. I just go along with conversations because I'm going to get further. It's just people value my opinion more when I don't really out myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's super interesting.
Yeah. I'm sure
Super
people would
interesting.
disagree with that, but
There's going to be people that disagree with everything that we talk about. Who
Yeah.
gives a fuck? That's the one thing that I've realized about starting this podcast is that it doesn't matter what you say. People are going to find a problem with it.
That's
it's
true.
Fucking crazy, man.
Yeah.
You'll be sitting. We'll have people on here talking about how they were in foster care and they were abused and blah blah blah, and someone will comment underneath the post, "You said the wrong word," and it's just like, dude, what?
yeah.
Why the fuck are you even on this page if
Yeah.
that's how you think? Don't fucking even subscribe to my channel if you're sitting here worried about the verbiage that someone who's talking about the most traumatic events in their life used.
And you pick out that one thing.
It's fucking crazy, man. People are just so miserable and they need to try to pull people down. And right now it's with trans people. People love pulling trans people down if they can. If they can go on someone's post and comment, you fucking da-da-da-da-da, they will, because it makes them feel good. It's crazy.
Yeah.
People are so sick.
I don't think you should. I think you should be able to have an opinion. But as far as technology has really fucked us over in social media, is all these people can basically be anonymous and say whatever they want without ever having that personal conversation with me. You can't tell me a lot of these things that people would say to your face,
No.
because they wouldn't.
No.
You know, and that takes a certain level of vulnerability from them to even have that conversation. And some people just either aren't capable or not ready for that.
Yeah, for sure. Have you had any hateful interactions since transitioning? Has anyone outright said anything wild to you?
I've tried to think back on this. I think a lot of it is more hush hush and probably say it behind my back for the most part. But since I'm not out there on social media and have a big platform or anything, I'm not really vulnerable to those types of things. This would be the only thing. But there's really no space for people to do that with me. And I will call people out. Well, I don't call people out. I actually honestly just try and educate people before I call them out. Because there's a big difference between somebody learning that I'm trans or knew that I used to be Emma instead of M and still using she and whatnot. Like if you look at me and you still keep using she, it's a very pointed thing. You almost have to make yourself do it. Mm-hmm. So you go past the point of just ignorance to hate. Mm-hmm. I can handle ignorance because I can help educate you. I don't think that should be my responsibility, but in some cases I do take it upon myself because who else is going to do it? So I will take that I take that as an opportunity to help people learn. But once you start getting past that, you've been taught, and now it's just hate.
Yeah.
I don't respect that at all.
Yeah, I've always looked at that ignorance as a good thing in a lot of ways, because that does provide a window for opportunity for someone to change. You
Exactly.
know, once they're past the point of ignorance, it's like, all right, dude, I'm not going to be able to get anywhere with you, and we don't need to have a conversation anymore.
Totally.
Buzz question here. The Z's or Zem bullshit. You always hear people being like, oh, I ain't going to call you this, or I ain't going to call you that. And usually it's in a hateful tone when they're saying it. For the people who don't know, what are they talking about when they say like Z's or Zem?
Honestly, it's a good question. I personally haven't. I went to Minneapolis Community College, and I live in Minnesota, so it's a more democratic state. Probably more of these situations I would come into. But honestly, I haven't met anybody that goes by that personally. So I'm not totally sure how somebody who identifies as Z's or Zem as their pronouns would say that. I would imagine it has something to do with being non-binary. I'm sure there's people out there in the comments provide us with the definition. I would probably research it myself, but I don't know that much about it. I mean, I would respect somebody who uses Z's or Zem pronouns. It would be different, and it would take me a second. But usually I'll default to they, them, because that's the most respectful thing if you're really uncertain. And people, don't be afraid to ask people their pronouns. The more you ask people their pronouns, the more it's going to become a normalized thing to just do that. And I don't think anybody should be offended by it, because if you do it to everybody, you're not misgendering anybody. But yeah, I don't have much of a opinion on it, because I just respect it. Like, it doesn't affect me whatsoever. So if somebody would like me to use those pronouns, I'll use them.
Right.
It's just, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's such a good question.
Litter boxes?
Litter boxes. I guess, yeah. Why don't we talk about that? In Minnesota, there was a topic of conversation, and I don't know if this was a nationwide thing, but in Minnesota for a little while there was a specific school who was kicking around the idea of putting litter boxes in their school because they had a group of people who are identifying as cats. Do you think that that's like a realistic thing that we should be doing as a public school system, is putting litter boxes in in bathrooms? And B, do you think someone can be trans species? Is that a thing?
That's a good word for it. And I guess some people who maybe identify as trans species should come out here and comment on it. But I definitely have a hard time with identifying as a different species, because it's a different species. People might say the same thing about our genes and biological sex, but I think there's more to it than just that. And I'm not a genealogist, so I don't know. But as far as saying you're a different species, it doesn't make sense. And unless we can edit our genes to get to a different species, like if you were able to, I think I said this the other day, if you were able to inject something in you to start growing legit claws, or maybe start turning into a wolf or something, which would kind of be dope. Honestly.
Motherfucker, I'm Wolverine.
Yeah, right? Or to start like growing that type of fur. It would be kind of crazy. But I mean, if you were able to start taking those steps, shit, you're a fucking wolf, bro.
Yeah, I'll call you a wolf if you're willing to go that far.
Yeah, if you're a cat, like if that's really how you feel, unless you're planning on taking over the world with a bunch of a pack of wolves, in reality, why does it matter? You know? So I think it's definitely different than just being trans if you're talking about trans species. Talking about the litter boxes in schools, I think having the conversation with those, it's going to be children. I mean, I would imagine this wasn't a college having this conversation. Just sit down and have a conversation with the kids. Stop leaving it to the adults. Talk to the kids. Don't lead them a certain way. If we talk about it for legit, tell the kids, like, it's not hygienic. We have toilets for a reason. It's not hygienic. Even cats learn. Let's say they really are determined that they're cats. And I think it's honestly sometimes a trauma response to identify as a different species, especially as a child in this world. Can you imagine being in middle school again? Absolutely terrible.
Right.
So, of course, it's almost like they're disassociating doing that. Like, it's a way out. It's a way to feel comfortable. But as far as like litter boxes, it's not hygienic. Cats learn to pee in the toilet, so you can also learn to pee in the toilet. It shouldn't be about that, but that is like, just take it from a different perspective. Don't say oh yeah, this isn't a thing. You can't do that because blah 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 blah. Take a legit conversation. Like, buddy, we can't do that because it's like you would have to change the if you think about it logically, you'd have to change the litter box. It would spread diseases. You can't do it. You can't take your clumping cat litter. You know, it just wouldn't make sense. You can't do it. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
If we can use the toilet, if a cat can use the toilet, they will.
Yeah. Have you ever kicked around the idea of detransitioning?
I have. Definitely being on the more, I think of myself sometimes as more non-binary than I do identify as a trans male, but I have poked around the idea of detransitioning, but for me personally, it wouldn't be worth it for me, for my mental health. There's too many pros to my transition than there is negatives, you know.
Right.
But I would say the reason I would detransition is like, I don't know if I could reverse male pattern baldness, but I have a really hard time with my hair thinning, and eventually I will probably have to shave my head if I don't do something else. I really have a hard time with that. I don't like it whatsoever. There's just too many things I wouldn't want to happen if I were to detransition. But it's definitely easier relationship-wise. I mean, me and my wife are in a committed relationship, but it's not like we don't do some crazy shit. So as far as like searching for sexual partners, it's way, you can imagine, way more difficult as a trans guy than it would have been as a woman.
Yeah.
Like so much more difficult, which is super fucking annoying.
And not that you're not an attractive male by any means. That's not what I'm saying when I point this out. But you were a very pretty female when you were, you know.
Yeah.
Like you would have had no problem.
Yeah, I can give
if
you a
were
picture.
Just like a fucking whatever, you know, whatever you were just a straight cis woman. But
Yeah.
You wouldn't have had any issues polling, you know.
Yeah, you can use this as your fucking thumbnail. I really don't care because I know it'll pull people in. But me in 8th grade, I show people the picture sometimes because it is really interesting to see me ultra feminine. I didn't wear dresses that often, but sometimes it was fun, you know. I mean, a lot of guys will wear dresses. Not a lot, I guess. There's a handful of guys that still wear dresses, or do drag and whatnot. But yeah, I would say I was conventionally attractive as a woman. Yeah.
You brought up drag. Do you think you know, like there was a topic of conversation not so long ago in the news where drag shows in schools and drag shows in this and drag shows to kids, blah, blah, blah. Do you think that is something that kids should be a part of?
Yeah. I think there's a place for, if you're going to Sunday brunch, you're going to drag brunch, your kids, think of being in that mindset. Your kids don't really know that much different. It depends on how old they are, but first address what are you afraid of. Having a drag queen read a book in school. It's more of a performing art than it is anything else. Usually it comes back to the whole grooming thing. I think if kids are exposed to somebody who's in drag, that inherently comes from probably a fear of trans people, even though not all drag queens are trans. A lot of them aren't. It's probably not even addressed. They see this really cool woman dressed up in a badass outfit reading a book. You know, that's really all it is.
Yeah.
And until you go to a drag show and see a drag performer perform, which is pretty badass, so you should.
It is really fucking cool. I'm not gonna lie. We were in Miami the other day, and they have one of the best drag shows I've ever seen. These motherfuckers are athletes.
Yeah.
Doing backflips off tables, doing backflips on the ground, doing backflips into splits. Like, you're just like, holy fuck. Dude,
it's entertainment.
Running in heels and doing a front flip. Like, motherfucker, I've never even put on heels, but it looks hard as hell. And I imagine doing a front flip in them bitches would be even harder.
I would want my daughter to see them and be like, yeah, hell yeah, that's something I can do, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Kind of a good role model.
Yeah.
I get that there is some drag performances that are very hypersexualized because that's just the environment and what they're going for. But I mean, you're not going to find a hypersexual drag queen, you know, going into the school. People would use common sense. You're not there to fucking sexualize yourself to children. You're there to just read a book and show them a little bit something different, you know?
Yeah,
it's still a form of entertainment. You don't see a bunch of girls that are just totally dressed up like that often. So.
And so I know this is a somewhat sensitive conversation in your relationship, and we don't have to touch on it if you don't want. But the idea of having children at some point, where do you stand with that?
Yeah. So that's definitely been in the talks. And excuse me, I have a burp. Jesus Christ.
Just throw up on camera.
It's a really hard conversation to have, as a lot of people in the LGBT community is I can't give sperm, obviously. IVF, which it's called reciprocal IVF. If I wanted to give one of my eggs, which we don't even know if would be viable because there's not enough research on trans men out there on whether or not we can have children. I know if I were to go off of my testosterone, there's a good chance that I could still get pregnant. But it would be awesome to do reciprocal IVF, which would be giving my wife one of my eggs and she just carries the baby basically. We have no choice but to choose somebody's sperm. It's a really hard process, and a lot of it takes a lot of money, and if you don't have access to that or wealthy access to that, there's a lot of shit to weigh. Mm-hmm. In some ways, it's kind of the only time it's nice to be us is we were forced to wait to have children. Mm-hmm. We've been forced to wait to have children, which is absolutely terrible, but also good in some ways because it really makes you think, is having a child right for us / me? Mm-hmm. Where you have a lot of people out there, obviously a lot of people are accidents. I was probably an accident. Like, there's no room for thinking. Mm-hmm. It's just so normal to just have a child because you shoot at a fucking, a winner. Mm-hmm. And in this day and age, I don't think that's healthy. Mm-hmm. There's so many quote unquote messed up kids, messed up children, messed up situations that resulted from, not thinking.
Yeah. I mean, I know coming from a broken family in a way, like obviously it all turned out to be what it is, and I'm happy for my life and I'm blessed and whatnot, but I do know that life could have been a lot easier if there was planning going on, for everybody involved in the situation, not just me. And I think that there's we've had multiple people on here now who went through foster care. Yeah. And it's like, the foster care system is there to be a positive, but it is not a fucking positive, dude. I've only heard a couple success stories, and those success stories came with a lot of trials and tribulation. Mm-hmm. So like, people should be a lot more prepared when it comes to having kids. And honestly, there's a lot of people out here who shouldn't fucking have kids, period. Yeah. And obviously we live in a free country, which there's a reason why a lot of us are happy and proud to be American, and I'm happy and proud to be American for a lot of different reasons, and this is something we could never do, but there should fucking be some standardized testing, motherfuckers. Like, dude, it's like, come on. You don't know how to change a diaper, you're having a kid. You don't know what formula is, you're having a kid. You don't know how to, and that's the basics, right? Like, you're going to raise a kid and you're fucked up mentally. What do you think your kid's going to be like? There's just got to be more care when it comes to these people having children.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with that. And you kind of get into eugenics when you talk about standardized testing. But I think lots of different people can be really great parents, but there's not enough. We're not taught to learn how to be parents. Mm-hmm. You read a couple books, but that doesn't make sense. We've tossed around the idea of, it should almost be mandatory for people to do 2 years in childcare. Because my wife and I have been in childcare. I mean, obviously when we were little, but like, we worked in childcare. She currently works in childcare. So having that experience and that knowledge about basically child psychology is so helpful. Mm-hmm. And knowing that stuff makes it really sad to watch a lot of situations, because people literally, like we said, don't know. They don't understand that the way children's brains work and how detrimental like the first 4 or 5 years of life are. I mean, the rest are too, but the first 4 or 5 years of life, children, we can't remember before age 4 or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. We don't know necessarily how we were raised in those years. And knowing those things could really help us understand ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I agree 100%. Obviously, no one would want to. I'm gonna ask a question, but I want to preface it by saying that no one would want to. Being trans obviously comes with a lot of hardships. Yeah. And I don't think most people would choose those hardships if they could. Just like being gay, I don't think there's a lot of people who are like, I want to be gay because I just want to be gay. And I understand that there is going to be a subsector of people who are looking for attention. And a way to get attention right now is to act a certain way. I think that's a very, 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 very small percentage of people. Do you think that there's a group of people, and I already know your answer, but do you think there's a group of people who are latching on to this trans community and calling themselves trans for attention?
For clout, almost.
For clout.
Yeah, just similar to the sexuality thing. There would probably be a very small subset of people, and those are the ones you're going to see in the media that could be just doing it for clout. It'd be a really sick and twisted way to get it, but I'm not going to deny that there's people out there that would sacrifice literally their own gender identity to get to that point. Because there's a lot of messed up people out there. It's definitely not the majority of trans people, obviously.
Definitely.
But the ones who are going to get the most attention are going to be people who are really extreme, and that comes for so many different communities and whatnot. So I won't deny that people like that exist, but definitely, like you said, not the majority.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you see these people on social media, and it seems like it's so inauthentic and not who they are. And then knowing a trans person such as yourself, where it's like, yeah, this is who you are, it does kind of just make you wonder, I wonder how many people are out there, especially with how, attention is a currency these days. Clout is a currency,
true.
And it's like one of the most important things to our society, which is sickening to think about. But clout is a currency, and if you can put a wig on and call yourself a different name for clout, there's a lot of people who might utilize that tool, which is sad because it tarnishes the name of the people who are actually trying to just be themselves.
At least if they're doing things that are harmful,
right?
Like portraying really harmful stereotypes or whatnot, because then you kind of get into, this reminds me of like gamer guys dress up, they might call it drag or they might call it cross-dressing. It depends. Not saying those things equate, but it depends on what those dudes probably would say it was. But that's like kind of a good example. They dress up in, anime outfits or something and go on Twitch or whatever it is, and then wait for people's reactions once they start talking, which is a form of entertainment. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily super harmful, but it's definitely like a debatable, controversial thing of whether or not you should do that. Like, is this pure entertainment? At what point does this become harmful? What point does this become I don't know if detrimental is the right term, but harmful to the community, like tarnishing the reputation of us? Is it making a mockery, or is it just another form of entertainment type thing?
Right.
So that's definitely a fine line that I think we still have to explore.
Definitely. All right. You're obviously on vacation, and I don't want to keep you in this room all day, but there's so many questions that I have to ask, and I think that eventually we will do a follow-up episode, and we'll source a little bit more crowd questions, because I think that this is going to open a door for people to ask questions, and I think that we have an interesting dynamic that a lot of people don't have, that I have the ability to ask you questions, and then where I stand as far as how I feel about you, so I can ask a little bit racier questions that people would not feel comfortable asking. So is there anything that you would like to add? Is there anything that you would like to touch on? We can talk about anything that you want. It's your floor. We could do whatever you got to do,
I'm sure if I sat down and really thought about it, I could think of some things. I think a follow-up convo would be great, especially if it's something that people are looking for and they really do have genuine questions about stuff. I'm more than happy to answer them. I've really valued our conversation and being able to talk back and forth without, like you said yesterday, the sense of animosity, or this isn't just like a political conversation. I'm not talking to some random person just to cause a ruckus, like it's a genuine conversation just to mainly educate people and let other people know that it's cliche, but it's going to be okay. And,
Yeah. I think, I am a cis white conservative male. You are.
I wouldn't label myself as necessarily a liberal, but I guess some of my ideals would probably fall into that. But I like to think for myself.
Yeah, and I think that people need to see that it's okay to sit down and have these conversations, and it doesn't need to end in animosity, violence, hatred. You should be able to sit down in a room with someone and have a conversation and see both points of view, and both educate one another on your belief system and how you feel, and you should come out of that situation as a better person, not coming out with negative feelings. Like, it's just crazy that people can't sit down and have conversations these days. It's just frustrating.
Yeah.
And that bothers me, because like that's the whole point, right? Is seeing point of views and growing as a human being. And I think if you're not striving to be your best self and make the people around you feel better about themselves and cared about and loved for, then what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. I would say one last thing is, I don't think you have you said different viewpoints, and I think there are different viewpoints here, but I don't know if there's enough pushback in what I'm saying. Follow-up questions, why that would be so important is I don't necessarily have all the time to address the things that people are immediately thinking, because I know there's visceral reactions to some of the things that I'm sure I said that people have real questions about, and it would just be great to be able to answer them in this context. Yeah,
for sure.
The discussion thing.
So that being said, we will do a follow-up episode, that's for sure. If you have anything that you would like to ask Em, or if you think that there's talking points that you wish we would hit on, the DMs are always open. Also, we're always looking for guests. So if this is something that interests you and maybe you want to come to Florida on vacation and experience this amazing life that I live, we're always looking for guests. So put your name in the bucket, and more than likely we will select your name in the bucket. And I think I want to let you get back to your vacation, because this is your last day.
Yeah, it is.
I appreciate you coming out and being willing to even have this conversation, because a lot of people shy away from hard conversation. I mean, obviously it helps that I've known you your whole life and you've known me your whole life, so there's that. But I do appreciate you willing to talk about these things, and even being open to having these hard or answer these hard questions.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this has been great. Shout out to Tested and Twisted.
Shout out Tested and Twisted. And again, you bitch ass motherfuckers better follow the goddamn page. Hit that subscribe button. Happy New Year, everybody.
Thanks.